Hi everyone, welcome to Smart City Institute Japan's webinar series called Global Perspective on Smart Cities. I'm Nagumo, Executive Managing Director of Smart City Institute Japan, your host today. And this week we have actually a special week focusing on European smart cities. We call it European Smart City Inspired Week. And except for tomorrow, we're going to have 4 days of webinars focusing on different aspects of the European smart cities. Today, we have a focus on MyData Global, and the title of this seminar today is the MyData, a paradigm of creating human-centric digital services for smart cities. Now, let me invite today's distinguished speaker, Mr. Teemu Ropponen from MyData Global. So team, come in. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for joining me. Right, and then I really welcome you. And this is your second time to speak at this webinar, and you are almost like a familiar face in this series.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, it was maybe 2.5 months ago that we talked. So looking forward to talking with you and everybody else who is here today.
Yeah, so we have been focusing on activities of the MyData Global since it's becoming so important and global as well in the space of these smart cities. And for the audiences, just a message. I'd like to welcome the viewers to send us a message, questions, and encouraging comments to Tim through the chat box. And when you write a message, please choose all under the pull-down menu so that we can share all the writings with all the viewers. And first, we're going to have the presentation by Teemu. And after that, we're going to have an open discussion, including the comments in the chat box. All right, without further ado, let me hand over to Tim. It's all your time.
All right. Thank you. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen, my slides?
Yeah, Tim, it's perfect.
Perfect. So hi, everybody. Glad to be here. My name is Teemu Ropponen. I work as the General Manager of MyData Global. And yes, talking about MyData and specifically what MyData might mean in the context of smart cities. So very briefly about who am I and who are we. MyData Global is an international nonprofit. We are headquartered in Helsinki, Finland, which is where I am sitting right now, but acting internationally, acting globally. As an organization, we were founded actually pretty exactly 3 years ago. We are just in celebrations for our 3-year anniversary. But the MyData thinking goes back a little bit farther away, 8-9 years ago, when we did some work for the Finnish government. And right now, in MyData Global, we have members from over 50 countries, and our members include 100 organizations and about 400 individuals. And with Smart City Institute of Japan, we have a strategic memorandum of understanding also, so we call them friend organizations. We act, like I said, globally, including through local hubs or chapters, which we have on 6 continents, and then different thematic groups. And by thematic groups, I mean, for example, health or design or cities. MyData Operators. So there are different areas which are interesting and relevant for us. And here, just to give you an idea of where we are active. Well, we are originally a European-based initiative, so you can understand that many of our chapters are in Europe. But increasingly also outside of Europe, and for example in Asia we have quite many quite active hubs. So our Japan hub has been very active over the years, but also lately, for example, Korea, Taiwan, and Greater Bay Area very, very active hubs. And I think there are some people present from these locations. And as maybe English may not be, or the global organization may not be the only point of contact for all of you. So I just want to make note that the MyData Japan hub has been doing some great work over the past several years, and of course encourage you to also get yourself familiar with the Japanese hub, if that is the one closest to you. But okay, I did not come here to make a presentation about just about MyData Global, but rather smart cities and how personal data in line with the MyData principles could make our life better. So let me start with just a little bit of background on more on the data. So first of all, the MyData logo. There are 11 sectors around that. For example, this one on applications, IoT, learning, public transport, energy, and so on. Enormous amounts of data are gathered about us every single day. But how do we use that data? How can we best benefit from that for the benefit of the individual, for the benefit of the society, for the benefit of businesses? That's what we are talking about. And right now, I think it's 6 o'clock in Japan. So for example, just during today, probably you will have enormous amounts of travel data or shopping data or IoT device data gathered about you. And how big is this amount of data? Well, the total amount of data that was gathered in 2018 produced in the world was 33 zettabytes, and that's well, that's a lot of zeros. And just to indicate that from 2018 to 2025, it's estimated that even during that time, it's 5 times as much more data that is created, partially due to the 5G, the IoT, and becoming more and more datafied as our society is becoming. That's intense. So then we have all this data, and then the issues are that, well, okay, are we actually missing some data, or is there some data that we could have that we are perhaps not having? But then also misuse of data, and that's of course difficult to know what all data do we have that we potentially could use, could make of, and then thirdly, of course, kind of misuse, bad use of data, even sometimes, let's say criminal use of data. In the cities, in the concept of cities, there has been also a little bit of sometimes skepticism or at least concern. We're talking about that, okay, is there a conflict between privacy and innovation? Is there a conflict between security and freedom? And is all this digital technology taking over cities in a way that it's not really a smart city, but it's becoming even a controlled city, and that's maybe getting not necessarily where we want to go, into some kind of a dystopian worlds. And as the French Data Protection Authority says that, okay, the city services are relying on personal data, but they are collected sometimes by commercial actors, not always a good thing. It can be a good thing, but not always. And again, Lyon then holding up the beacon and saying that, you know, as a city, we hold a lot of data about people. We must be exemplary. We must be kind of forerunners in how we do this thing in a positive way. Well, one thing that we discussed, it was an interesting conversation 2.5 months ago. We were talking a little bit about trust, and this was just one study from the Finnish innovation fund Sitra, which says that basically nearly 4 out of 10 consumers say that digital services or lack of trust is an obstacle to digital services. So companies have not necessarily invested in trust as a way to stand out. And that, of course, hinders, for example, the digital economy quite a bit if people cannot trust in using digital services. I think there was another similar study that said that 4 out of 10 people have stopped doing some kind of a digital transaction because they were not sure how their personal data is handled. Now, one of the reasons why this trust for individuals is difficult is this. So this is actually an Israeli artist who did this installation, and what you see, these colored stripes, they are big social media services terms of service. And they are incredibly long, as you know. They might be legally right, or there might be something there that we don't fully understand. But for us to read all those privacy policies, it would take us 76 work days to read each year, according to this Carnegie Mellon research. So in practice, that's impossible. So no wonder we're having a difficult time also trusting some of the organizations, knowing that that data has also been misused, but perhaps within what is said in these incredibly long terms of service. In the context of cities, we've had, and perhaps many know the case of Toronto, and if not, I encourage to Google that, and the Sidewalk Labs, a Google subsidiary, which had in principle very interesting, great plans to deploy smart city services in a new area in Toronto that was being built. But in practice, because people were not involved enough, because there was a lack of transparency, it angered a lot of people, caused a lot of pushback, a lot of activism, and in the end, the project was canceled. You need to involve people to build trust, to get the public acceptance for such projects. Of which then the good example, and I have been informed that this is in detail later on this week, is then in the European city of Barcelona, being much more open, more ethical, let's say more collaborative by nature, the way of deploying smart city services for the benefit of citizens, for the benefit of cities, and yes, for the benefit of businesses as well. So for cities, there are many opportunities from the side of considering the use of data. Many cities actually are pretty huge data holders, and this data potentially could be reshared to other services, to research, for other purposes. Cities themselves are responsible for economic development and for innovation, and could well lead the way, showing how to do services well and for the benefit of citizens, for the benefit of public good also. And then cities at least should be, they are or should be accountable to their cities, to their citizens, I'm sorry, and citizens are, at least in Europe, according to their own workshops and studies, and according to some non-city studies, cities are typically trusted. And they are also near the citizens, near the residents, even more so than for example, the government. And yes, cities are also kind of areas where there are lots of use cases from a variety of domains. But it's good to realize that every city is just one city. And what is interesting, of course, is when people travel, people move, people commute from one city to the next. How can we ensure interoperability of services when people travel, for example? Just like we learned from the Sidewalk Labs case, the people-private partnerships or public-private partnerships is not enough. We need to get the people involved. So these PPPPP, 4 Ps, people, public-private people partnerships, and community involved. Wow, that is a difficult word. So then in a McKinsey report, then like what type of areas, what things are there that where smart city can be useful? And I'm sure many of you know this. I only recently saw this and was quite intrigued because it seemed to fit so well with the kind of MyData thinking and some of the MyData cases. So particularly in time and convenience, environmental quality, social connectedness, and civic participation, some of the key areas, but also health, safety, cost of living, and jobs. So here, all kinds of smart city technologies can provide huge improvements. And I go through a few cases in a little bit that I think fit well with this. So okay, that was a bit of background on personal data in the context of cities, and then I talk about MyData as one kind of a solution area or an approach how we can make use of those opportunities that I mentioned. First, I want to say that MyData, again, MyData, we are a nonprofit and very much a network organization. MyData in itself is not a company and it's not a product. It's more of a way of implementing digital services, a way of thinking which balances the data rights between individuals, companies, and the society. The key in the MyData vision is that us individuals, we should be in control of the data that's gathered about us. And this is a matter of strengthening human rights, our basic fundamental digital rights, while at the same time we know that personal data, when done right, based on trust, can be key to opening opportunities and for businesses to develop new innovative services. So what we want to achieve is at the same time have our data protected, but have that data also used on people's terms, and that's why we talk about data empowerment. Of course, you know the European General Data Protection Regulation, and you might be asking what's the linkage between MyData and GDPR. They are very strongly linked. Both are related to strengthening rights and improving trust in data handling. But perhaps even more so than GDPR, MyData aims at enabling new personal data-based services to be developed. And of course, as a whole, this is not an easy ground. We talk about the bacon, lettuce, tomato sandwich or BLT sandwich. In our language, we talk about the perspectives of business, legal, tech, and society that need to be considered. Well, right now, this kind of giving people more control is very relevant on multiple levels. It has been on local levels, and I have here Helsinki as one example, but that is certainly not the only city. I talk later about Lyon in France and Espoo in Finland, but talking about how locally their data policies aim at giving or using personal data on behalf of the citizens and on the citizens' terms. Then we have national governments in Finland, in Sweden, in Korea, in other countries that have national programs national government programs that somehow take personal data into account. And then on a regional or international level, particularly interesting to us has been the European Union's work. And there MyData was mentioned as a promising key initiative in the European data strategy. And right now there are still some final negotiations going on. We have actually a few different regulations coming up relating to data economy, including the Data Governance Act, which is highly relevant for us. So this is to say that right now we feel that MyData is relevant in much of the policy landscape. In the European strategy, MyData was mentioned as promising significant benefits to individuals, not read every word. And in the Data Governance Act, this act clarifies the role of data intermediaries. And I think this is similar to what you have as the information banks, and in the MyData community, we talk about MyData Operators. So the data infrastructure needed for the data flows to happen, and that is being regulated. And that's good because we have been missing some of those legal foundations. So some of the cities, and I know that again you are hearing from Barcelona later on. Many and these cities, of course, mainly from Europe. So actually, we would be very interested to also learn and know more about what is happening in Japan. So maybe this as a one ask that vice versa. Maybe some Japanese cities could come and tell us more what they are doing. But let me go through a couple of MyData examples. And one thing that, of course, right now we are talking about, it's the COP26 meeting, and we are talking about, well, how can we live more sustainable lives so that some of the cities don't drown underwater, and that first of all, we can manage to live in the first place. Well, Grand Lyon in France, they have been doing for years experiments on MyData and giving control over about the data to their citizens. And right now they have a project called Ecolio. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So basically, taking data from multiple IoT devices, so taking your gas, your water, and your electricity data through an intermediary or a MyData operator, in this case done by a company called Cozy, and aggregating and allowing that to be used in an app called Ecolio. It's a kind of a dashboard where you can see your consumption, and you can see that how you are doing, how much you are using water, gas, electricity, but also how you are doing it compared to others, and that would be anonymized, aggregated data that you are getting from others. So of course you don't see other people's individual data. And this can help you make some decisions, perhaps change your behavior to some extent. And one thing, interesting thing, I think that what Lyon is doing is they are actually kind of gamifying and rewarding good behavior. so that in fact, if you are able to cut down on your energy or do certain things, you might be able to get further benefits, further discounts, and this way you can kind of reduce the environmental footprint. So there is this project is still in early phases, but there is a behavioral psychology behind this. So they are doing psychological or behavioral psychology experiments to understand that does this application really change the way people behave, because of course that is the impact that they are after, not only that okay, it's nice to see the usage, but rather how will that influence the people's behavior. I'm excited to hear about this. Unfortunately, we don't have the results yet, but one experiment that very eager to hear about. Then from the private sector, but still within, well, perhaps a little bit outside the concept of smart cities, but explaining the use of personal data for sustainability, is what's called My Carbon Action. And it's done by a company called Enfuse. And Enfuse provides infrastructure and services for banks. And basically this carbon action is a digital tool for consumers to get insights on their everyday activities. And basically the way that it works is that it's tracking carbon footprint based on financial transactions. So basically, based on what kind of banking you do, what kind of transactions you do, and here just a couple of examples. In the application, it's trying to categorize that okay, this transaction was for travel, this one was for food, this transaction was for electricity, this one was for gas. And by knowing about the person, there's actually like scientific profiles and algorithms that depending on what kind of a person you are, you can understand that okay, 100 euros of groceries roughly mean in Finland for a 45-year-old male, it means that okay, this is the footprint. And so on. So it's trying to estimate the CO2 footprint based on these transactions and based on what is known about the person otherwise. So that's the CO2 footprint, and there are multiple cases like this. And some actually cities are also thinking that should they be doing kind of CO2 footprint calculators. There are cases in France where specifically the area of mobility is looked at. So how much CO2 you are emitting through the transport services you use. But then I thought I will just maybe say a few words about the Finnish city of Espoo, which is right next to the capital Helsinki. And I thought that maybe I will talk about Espoo because well, last time we talked about Helsinki, and there's some interesting things happening here, although they are in early phases still. So I have a couple of slides from that I've cut into my presentation from Espoo. So they have been looking into how they can utilize MyData in their upcoming services. How can they be effective and resident oriented? And this was how, again, I think it's repeating a little bit what I said, but I think it's just interesting to hear exactly how the city themselves are wording. So that indeed the cities collect a lot of data, but it's scattered and often unavailable. Again, referring to very beginning, this means that it might result in kind of missed use of data. So potentially the data could be used for good, but it's scattered and often unavailable. Well, one of the strengths of the cities are that, okay, they do have a lot of data, and according to ESPO, and I know this is not always the case in Japan, but based on this survey, is that cities are trusted data users. So there is some accountability. But cities don't use data without consent, and they feel that the kind of ethical sustainability and kind of transparency on how that data is used is essential to success. So last time I have been in the webinar, I talked about the Helsinki as a MyData operator case, and it's part of a larger program called City as a MyData operator. There are 4 cities in Finland who are involved. So Helsinki is doing something technically and is soon done with the first phase of that, whereas the cities of Espoo, Turku, and Oulu are more still studying, taking a slightly slower, more maybe research-oriented look on how they will be deploying MyData in the future. So they did quite extensive, and I didn't put here for the sake of time all the background of what they've learned, although we'll be happy to share more on that. But they did quite a lot of citizen surveys, like how do you feel about data being collected? How do you feel about it being used? What kind of services would you like? And what was interesting was that there was a like service forecasting, personalization, for example, were very positively taken, but then targeting was not really appreciated by the citizens, and that people really want to donate their data for research and development purposes. So that's one use case of MyData, that you are not necessarily getting benefits right away, but you are giving your data for urban planning or for service development or for other things. And as is quite understandable, the kind of use cases that help your everyday life got the most support. Well, in the next door city, Helsinki, the use case that they are doing to help with the everyday life is to lessen the bureaucracy when you are bringing your child to daycare. And again, interestingly, things like allergy or incapacity, I think that means like disability data, people want to share, but their consumption and purchase data, what they're buying from shops, not so much to the cities. Maybe for the sake of time, I will not get into deeper detail, but in the MyData Global, we did a report called the State of MyData 2021 in May of this year. And ESPO used the framework that was presented in the State of MyData to find some key big areas where they will want to do services. For example, in sustainability, for example, having peer group reporting of carbon footprint data, not only my own but also my peers. We call their like kind of our data. It's not only personal, it's also also more broad. So in summary, cities have a lot of data, and there are a lot of use cases, including ones that citizens feel very positive about or cautiously positive about in many of the core processes of the city. And the city can and wants to tie MyData into more strategic goals and wider societal impact. It's not only for creating convenient, good services. And then we look forward to understanding how the city will then actually start piloting on MyData. And I talked a lot about the cities, but as with Helsinki, the city feels that it's important that it's not only about the city, it's also about the companies. And sometimes city data can be shared with companies to provide good services, or companies' data can be provided to cities. And there must be an environment of trust, common goals, common principles. That's what we are after. There needs to be collaboration, but also at this time, it's still a lot about learning and sharing. And then, since we are talking about wider ecosystems, just needs to be balanced that everybody is getting some benefits, and that is really the challenging of these kind of ecosystem business models. I think we are in very early phases of learning about them. Okay, I think I will. So that was about Espoo, and I think I will skip Helsinki for now. We are running a little bit short on time. I will get back to that in the conversation if we need to. And I have some few examples. But maybe we get to that in the conversation and Q&A bit. I just want to close out with a few words about the why, and just coming back to this, that okay, in the end, it's about getting this fair, sustainable, and prosperous digital society, and this kind of human-centric MyData approach we feel is a must for this. People would be getting value from their data, setting the agenda on how that is used. And for organizations, the ethical use of data is the most attractive option. And again, it's a matter of three fundamental shifts that are needed. We talk about from formal to actionable rights, meaning that it's more like one-click rights that we can access or delete or reuse, share the data. We talk about moving from data protection to data empowerment. So it's not only people being protected, but also empowered by combining data from multiple sources. And then thirdly, moving from closed to open ecosystems, meaning that people can really choose between services and change from one service provider to another, take their data along. It's not only the big tech or monopolies that are our choices. So how to do it then? And I get to this very briefly, so we have time to discuss. We have in the MyData Declaration, which is kind of our fundamental or kind of cornerstone, 6 MyData principles, which we encourage our members and others to adhere to. So firstly, giving individuals the control of their personal data, that in the first place. Having the individual as the point of integration, meaning that as individuals, we should really have a full 360 degrees understanding of what data is gathered where about us, and how do we control that. Give the ways to really empower individuals, and one key there is allowing for access and reuse of that data. whatever data is collected in one place can and could be used in other places. To develop, to build trust, to build trustworthy services, they of course need to be transparent and accountable, need to have understandable terms of service, and people need to understand how the data is used. And of course, then having interoperability to make the data flow from one service to another. That's of course a lot of trickery to be done in terms of interoperability. Interoperability on different levels, not only technical but also kind of legal and organizational. So we encourage. Well, of course, then looking at kind of governance, infrastructure, and standards. I skip a little bit so we can get to the conversation parts. I want to say as we are now talking, and finally during these COVID times, we've had to work a lot online. We are finally meeting physically also, actually next week in the Netherlands. But there, I would invite also people from Japan to join our sessions online. Right now, we have about 130 people registered. And why I encourage is because we get to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that I mentioned about. So we are basically workshopping together with companies, together with experts on topics like design, on topics like business models, European landscape, children's rights, sustainable development goals, and then, for example, this MIM4, which is a technical interoperability standard that's being developed as we speak. And we hear also from the city of Helsinki and city of Amsterdam. So if any of this what I've been talking about sounds at all interesting to you, then do join us next week. And I encourage, of course, the Smart City Institute Japan people also and members to join. But with this, I think I will pause here and perhaps we discuss. And I have some backup slides if there are things that I didn't cover yet. I do. If you believe in what we are saying, I do ask that you sign the MyData Declaration, and then you can join us on Slack. For engagement with about 3,000 people. And of course, we ask you to join as a MyData Global member. We are as strong as our membership, and right now 100 organizations and 400 people. Can we make that 200 organizations and 1,000 people in the next half a year? That is my challenge. So with that, I think I will pause for a moment, and let's have a discussion.
Okay, Teemu, thank you for the excellent presentation. I'm always delighted to see the progress you have been making. That's full of lesson learned from your exercises. And let's talk about some of the points you raised. And for viewers, again, I would like to encourage all the viewers to send the messages, comments, questions through the chat box. I will pick them up and share with you in the discussion. All right, thank you very much. And first question or points I would like to discuss with Teemu is that it's shocking to say, 76 working days to read all private policies each year. It's shocking. Right, and what's the remedy to it? I kind of assume that having, let's say, MyData logo on some of the digital services, it's kind of endorsed by MyData Global, that this service, digital service, is based upon the ideas of the principles of the MyData. so that it's safe. Is that kind of direction you're heading to?
It's possible. It's possible that in some way that we have these kind of trust marks that you don't have to read every single print there. Of course, as an organization, we are still relatively small and so on. So whether we do the trust mark or somebody else, I think that remains to be seen. Our members do use the MyData logo as a kind of a way to show that they are they use the MyData logo to say that, okay, we adhere to these principles, but we don't have a real way of checking that. But anyway, it's a statement by our members. And then the data intermediaries, what we call MyData Operators, they also use this specific MyData Operator logo to indicate that they have gone through a kind of a self-description process. Again, it's not an audited way of doing. It's more like a self-description and saying that claiming that, yes, we adhere to these principles. But just recently, in fact, the EU is also looking at this, particularly for the intermediaries, that there would be some kind of a trust mark so that people don't have to necessarily read all the black and white that's in the terms and conditions. But I would say that there is another angle to this also. I think we have talked about how can we get rid of, or at least lessen, the kind of long legal language. And one thing that might be there is to have some kind of icons or some kind of brief texts about how that data is used. Even though the lawyers may want the longer text also, but already having some set of icons, kind of like Creative Commons has icons for the copyrights. Have something like that for the different terms of service.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, to be honest with you, when I search on the web, sometimes, you know, do you accept a cookie kind of message pops up, and if I were to deep dive into the requirements, I have to read through all the details on the somewhere else. But you know, I usually skip that. Just, you know, no reading, no consideration, just accept it, because I want to access to the information that I want to access sooner, right? So there should be some ways of shortcutting the verification processes, either through the declaration, as you mentioned, or some kind of standardization, or, you know, some kind of a, you know, audit trail, as usually implemented by the quality control for the medicines or you know, the electronic the devices and so forth. Otherwise, I don't think, you know, normal citizens can actually read and you know, confirm what is requested.
No, and that is absolutely unfair to ask people to do that. So indeed, this kind of quality control and these type of mechanisms, I think more and more, for example, the various consumer rights authorities are also like looking at this and making sure that there is some quality control, not only for individuals, but especially for the vulnerable people as well. For example, right now, of course, with Facebook, Instagram, and the case of children, and really some awful misuse by Facebook, for example, and that has got to stop. But I mean, just like you know, when you go to the shop and you buy a radio or a razor or whatever, you don't read everything what is in your warranty or in the description of the product. You look at that, okay, there is a label that, yes, it's safe to use, and you assume that, okay, if it's broken or whatever, you can return it. So we need to get into a similar mode that okay, if I give the data, then I hear bad things about it, I can revoke access, revoke that consent. It should be easy for me. Or there should be labels, like I have the labels that, okay, this is a safe electricity or whatever. I should have labels that, yes, this is a safe use of data or ethical use of data.
Yeah, right. So in essence, this is a typical case of market failure, I would say, because the information is not symmetrical. Whoever who is controlling the data has more information than the normal consumers, right? So some kind of setup has to be in place through a government or the regulatory processes. That I think is linked to your BLT's idea. It's funny. The BLT is a sandwich to me, but it's nicely shortened all the necessary aspect of the data: business, legal, tech, and society, right?
Yes, yes, and we
go ahead.
Yes, and like I said, it's difficult, right? Because for many years we have been people have been saying that data is the new oil, which I think is not a very good analogy. But that's why people then hoard the data instead of trying to share it. So there is a lot of work to be done on the business side with regards to finding business models that okay, if a company shares data to another company or perhaps a city, how can they get rewarded for that, and how can we make that easy enough so that it happens? Of course, the legal developments which we talked about, and then technology, but as a whole, it's also about the kind of societal vision. And I think here that's I mean here the ethics, but also the other like other elements. What kind of society is it that we want to live in? Do we want the symmetric data relationships? Do we want do we want digitalization for everybody? I think Japan, just like Finland, has an aging population, for example. Well, how can we use the digitalization so that it benefits everybody? How can we perhaps use that personal data to make services easy to use, or how can we predict better what people needs? So it's really about kind of like the societal vision, also not purely the kind of business, legal, tech landscape.
You're right. Yeah, I think discussion is going to a bigger landscape right now, and which is, I think, essential. So the bottom line is that our society is transforming itself to something new, the digital society, right? And we are talking about a piece of the, I would say, the building block of the new society, which is the, some kind of justifications that the data can be used in a fair way, right? And then we talked about the declaration or branding or the auditing or whatever, and essentially the guaranteeing process must be established through some kind of a democratic processes, not autocratic processes, or not by single gigantic tech companies dominating all the consumers' behavior, right? And what do you think about the role of the government? We are not-for-profit organization, somewhat grassrooted, hearing what the people have to say. And we have been trying to change the kind of societal, how to say, attitude towards the data. And we are accumulating our actions to reach some kind of more collective actions, right? And then the government at the end is important apparatus to enforce what we believe is right. And now we are partnering with the local governments and the national governments, and even beyond the international governmental activities that are taking place at the principal level. And well, what's new in Finland, let's say? Well, what's the role government is playing in terms of safeguarding privacies or the personal data?
Well, I mean, of course, on a kind of a national level, the government's responsible for the regulation and can perhaps help in part with these kind of market failures and can help protect consumers and so on. But you talked about the local governments, so maybe I think about more from their perspective. So I think that first of all, the cities, when they develop services for the citizens, they can show the way, they can lead in being transparent, in being ethical, and they can start demanding, of course, governments procure the development of those services from private companies. And for example, cities should have in their own policies, in their own data strategies, this kind of fair use of data. And when they make the procurements, that should be among the criteria for selecting then who is the vendor who is selected. And through that, the vendors must build up skills in this kind of ethical and fair use of data. And this is something that I know that, for example, in the city of Helsinki, that they have done. They have demanded when they were doing the MyData operator, they were demanding that, okay, their vendor has to be a MyData operator. And then in the future, similarly, like there are demands maybe for open data, then within the requirements of new systems that are procured, perhaps things relating to transparency or terms of service or users' access to this data, and so on. And these requirements can be higher than what is mandated by law. So I mean, that's of course like MyData is above the kind of above the law in that sense that the bar is a little bit higher. But cities, because they do procure a lot, can also lead in that way. So at least these are the kind of easy ways where cities can lead. And maybe a third, I think a lot of these services are more and more developed in kind of ecosystems or networks. And sometimes cities also fund, not necessarily procure, but they also fund programs or fund initiatives. And I think it's interesting that can there be some guidelines what kind of initiatives are funded and have some kind of a requirement that they are kind of ethical or adhere to MyData or other good principles before they can get funded. So at least these types of things on my mind right now.
I agree with you. So collaboration with local government, I think is shorter way and also rational way to activate the thinking of ours into more practice. And you're right. If the local government with the backing of the citizens, support can set the ethical bar higher than regulatory requirements, which comes from the national government. I think it's an interesting phenomenon. The cities can create more ethical practices or the ecosystems that is resonating with the local community, citizens, and the government, and that is leading the standards instead of the national government leading standards. And also, I say the cities are now creating the global network. Like, sometimes it's being called interlocalization rather than internationalization.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting phenomenon. The decades ago, national government were the international players, but nowadays cities are more of the international players when it comes to this kind of smart city kind of stuff. and Europe is leading the way.
Yeah, you're right, and you pointed out something very interesting. That's very true, and we are involved ourselves with, for example, well, in Finland with some the big 6 cities. They have their own kind of consortia, and then the kind of municipal association which networks all the municipalities. But then internationally, with organizations like Open and Agile Smart Cities. And in that network, as you know, there is something like 150 cities that work together. So that type of networks are definitely important. But I did want to say a third comment, that we talked about companies and we talked about cities and governments as a way to kind of perhaps enforce this kind of stronger or better practices and actions. The one that I'm also curious about and have been looking at is that, well, how can individuals or let's say collectives of individuals activate themselves and demand their data rights, demand action, as one way to force companies and sometimes even governments to be more transparent. And here, like as an example, Uber drivers, both in Europe as well as, for example, in India, have kind of united together to demand their data so that they can understand the workings of Uber better, but also so they can do their work better and more profitably. That's one example of collective action, and I think that there is many to be done. But it's also that in addition to these cities working together and governments working together, there definitely needs to be some element of kind of bottom-up activism also to demand more from Facebook, or demand more from Uber, or demand more from governments for that matter.
Yeah, it's another good point. So in old days, it's the workers collective, right? So labor union, or nowadays gig workers, collective actions. Sometimes the digital platform cooperativism is another way of creating more equal footing in terms of the digital rights, not capitalists dominating the profits or outcome of the digitalization. Rather, the worker and the business leaders or investors should be on an equal footing. So it's like how this more social democratic way rather than neoliberal approach. Europe has been emphasizing solidarity, right? And we are going back to the kind of key principles that the European Union has raised decades ago.
Well, I would think so, and I would hope that that's like personally that's indeed what we are thinking about, this kind of and also thinking about the collective, that even if we are talking about like MyData and it may sound very individualistic, we are just enforcing there that every individual is valuable, but they're the kind of a social democrat or collectivist ways are that they are definitely an important reading of MyData, and indeed should maybe think less about a kind of a neoliberal or libertarian reading, but rather think about that. Okay, how can we get those power balances more equal? Like you said, we were talking that the power balances are not symmetric, and this kind of information asymmetry should be corrected. It's not possible to correct 100%, but anyway, much better than in the past.
Yeah, thank you very much, Team. And Team, let's move on to the comments from the viewers. Let me read them for you. First one from Ryo Osako-san. Thank you, Team, for the insightful session. on your MyData survey results, you mentioned service forecasting, personalization, and enriching information as key incentives for people to share their own personal data. Recently, we've been seeing some service providers who will actually pay cash for personal data, e.g. Data Corp, mobile expression. Do you also see these type of financial incentives as cash payment or discount as a viable incentive to encourage personal data sharing within the context of smart cities? It's a little complicated question. What do you think?
No, I get it. Thank you very much for the question. So right off the bat, I want to say that the data monetization and rewarding with money is very complicated, also ethically. So within the community, I think we are quite split. There are others who say that personal data is kind of like your vote, and you should not be selling your vote. That it's data that's integral to you. And then there are others who actually very much think that it's the way for viable business models is through kind of monetization of data. And of course, there are different shades of gray there. So yes, within MyData, there are many organizations who are doing it, who are experimenting with rewarding with data. I personally think that many interesting cases are much more than about getting a monetary reward. And like on a small scale, like if we're talking about research, what study has shown is that people would rather donate blood without any compensation than donate blood when they get money for it. They're more willing to do that. So often the money that you will get for donating your personal data is anyway quite small. But then perhaps a totally different perspective is, at least I am very much, or we're interested in use cases where for example, relating to life events, where that sharing of data can be quite transformational. For example, when you are applying for a job, sharing the data about your work history, about your study records, about your driver's license, whatever, could be done automatically from databases through kind of a MyData intermediary, MyData operator, into a recruitment platform. So you are combining data from multiple sources, and your incentive there is that, well, perhaps you will get the job, and making that easy. There are similar cases like that, in which the sharing, but sharing only for you and for serving you, is much more valuable than asking me, like, what is my degree, what is my work history, and so on, if it is for a marketing purpose or the like.
I see.
And maybe just one more thing to build on this is that at MyData Global, we are actually now kicking off a working group that is looking at our position on the data monetization. We have before not had, as an organization, a position on it, and knowing that there are multiple angles and tricky angles. And we are in fact just now, and I mentioned the Amsterdam event next week, that will be a kind of a kickoff to this work, and it will last several months. So if this data monetization was an issue that you are interested in, please do get in touch. I would be happy to invite you and hear your views on this as well. I will just post here on the Slack my email address as well. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, it's a great point actually. And at one end we have a data trading, right? So just like the trading in the financial instruments, you can trade the data, which been already taking place in China, I guess, Shanghai, I guess. A data exchange place is already launched. So it's a pure monetization oriented approach. And at the opposite end, you can see data as a common pool, like a commons. So if everyone share the data, it's benefited by everyone. And the costs associated with that, risk associated with that should be shared among the society or community. So it's a way of collective benefits. So even, it's maybe blood donation is somewhat similar to it, right? Maybe you can have some incentive to it, but at the end, it's a community-based idea. And,
sure. Yeah, and I don't think that there is only one way to go. I think it will depend. And of course, if I have issues about my health, I will be happy to give it to research. Maybe I'm not so happy to give it to some commercial service. I may be, but there may be, I make different logic in my head based on that. I had a point I wanted to make, but I think I got distracted. So let me see if I get back to that.
Okay. So next one. Let me move on to the next one. And by the way, thank you, Dixon, for supporting us in providing extra information and answering some of the questions. For viewers, Dixon is an important member of the MyData Global and also MyData Japan and Asia. And we always appreciate your collaborative behavior and support. Thank you very much, Dixon. And next question is from Kudo-san, Smart City Institute Japan. Thank you for your great presentation. You mentioned about My Carbon Action. How was COP26 evaluated in Finland? Was it success? Japan got the prize Fossil of the Day award at COP26. Well, how is it seen in Finland?
I'm sorry about the Fossil of the Day award. I was not aware of that. I think the results were mixed. I think that there were high expectations, and maybe things happen one thing at a time. And of course, we still wait to see what all is coming out of that. I think that there has been some interesting kind of conversations as a follow-up, and of course, even our Prime Minister highlighting the need or highlighting digitalization as one way for the green transition, so that the green transition is definitely tied to the digitalization. Perhaps there has been some disappointment, but I think that they're still waiting to hear out what comes out of it for real.
Okay, thank you very much. Am I correct to say that Europe, by and large, is prioritizing the green than digital, because digital is a means to the end, and green is almost like a vital for us to live. Right?
Yes, right. yes. But you see a lot of the COVID, or the essence of the COVID recovery funds was basically the green and digital transitions, and like you said, the digital is in many ways a means, and the green is indeed it's a how can we survive for generations? It's an existential issue. Digitalization is maybe a means to help in that issue.
Right, thank you very much. So Teemu, I think we are running out of the time right now, and we had again very meaningful discussion, and I think the viewers also appreciate your insights you shared with us today. And let's keep talking, and we would like to have this kind of a webinar with you from time to time, so we can catch up and share with the audiences what's been updated. So as a last moment, would you like to say something to the audience in Japan?
Yeah, well, thank you again to first of all to Smart City Institute in Japan for it's great that we have a good partnership and we do things together. It's not only on paper, but we have these regular webinars. So I'm very grateful for that. And yes, we are very, like I said, coming from Europe and having this European background, but there are a lot of people in Europe who are very interested to know what is happening in Japan, what is happening outside of Europe. And of course, we want to also work more outside of Europe. So I really look forward to connecting and learning more. Last time I was on this webinar, there were a few people who got in touch and we have had great engagements after that. So if you are at all interested in this, I of course, invite you to connect and also connect, please, with the MyData Japan people. Perhaps Dixon can post the URL, the address of the MyData Japan people as well. So we continue this discussion. We are keen to make sure that we collaborate internationally. There we go. There we have the MyDataJapan.org. It was a pleasure. It was a great way to start the week with this event. So I'm always happy to discuss with you.
Thank you very much, Tim. So we concluded the perfect day of the first day of the European Smart City Inspired Week. Thank you very much. Then let's keep it. Good luck. Right. Thank you.
Good luck with the week.
All right. All right. Kudo-san, your part.
Yes, so Teemu, thank you again for your great presentation. And I think, as you said, we had a good start for our European Smart City Inspired Week. This is the first day, and I would like to explain the program. So let me just quickly share with you. Yes, so thank you for viewing today. And after this event, you will receive the questionnaire. So we would appreciate if you cooperate with it. And the programs of the webinars will be available on SNSs such as Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn of Smart City Institute Japan. And also they are also posted on the Smart City Institute Japan's website. And the past videos are available on YouTube channel. And yes, as again, we started the European Smart City Inspired Week today. And the second day, we would have on Wednesday, we would have a guest speaker from Fireware Foundation. And also Thursday, we have a guest speaker from Tampere, Finland, city of Tampere, as well as Business Tampere. And on Friday, we would have a guest speaker from the Barcelona City Council, who is the commissioner, Mr. Michael Donaldson. So please stay tuned, and we appreciate you if you could come back and view these webinars. And the following week, next week, we would have an Estonia week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all about Estonia. And the first day, we will touch upon cybersecurity. And the second day, we will touch upon X-Road and digital ID. And Thursday, on internet voting. And we will have guest speakers from E-Governance Academy, a non-profit organization of the think tank in Estonia. So we would appreciate if you view next week as well. And Smart City Institute Japan, our members are growing, and we have 480 members, and also 33 executive advisors. And also our networks for global partners are growing as well. And today we had a guest speaker, Teemu, from MyData Global, and Wednesday we have a guest speaker from Fireware Foundation as such. So thanks again for viewing today, and we hope to see you again on Wednesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.